Welcome back to the Reptiles With Podcast. So today we have a little bit of a hybrid episode. A couple months ago, we had Dylan on from the Animals at Home podcast, and that was through, like a streaming thing, like Zoom-ish. And today we have another one of those episodes where we're going to get to know Tino a little bit more as he talks with Richard, right?
Yep.
From Tarantula Collective. It's going to be pretty much the bulk of this podcast. You guys are going to be able to hear more about Tino, about the stuff that he's into outside of reptile, some tarantula talk. You guys did do some conservation and reptile talk.
Yep. Wild caughts, controversial issues, all kinds of stuff.
Yep. Your
usual.
favorite shit. Yeah. But if you guys like these kinds of episodes, please let us know, and we'll do more of them. We'll talk with some people that are outside of Florida. We want to do more collabs. It's just obviously difficult when, we are in one place, and we really do like to do this live. But if we could do a little bit more of these hybrids, I think it's also good.
Absolutely, yeah.
You're so disgusting.
But on the topic of getting to know Tino a little bit better, Chuck's not here. Eric's here. Say hello, Eric.
Hello.
Yeah, so Eric, for those who don't know, is whenever I say timestamp or whenever
he does this.
Whenever I do this, I'm talking to Eric. Eric is the guy doing the ones and twos. He's working on the sound. He's writing down on the paper any notes that we have. But now he's in front of the camera because Chuck's not here today.
I'm replacing him today.
He's his replacement.
So
You gotta start yelling and saying
Yeah.
shit.
hi, I'm Puerto Rican.
Which is true. That's not
yeah,
incorrect.
it's not a racism. He is the
I
thing.
am. I can't prove it, but
Yep. So we are going to get to know Eric also a little bit better before we start talking tarantulas. Eric has stories for us.
I do have stories today.
Let's do the Crutchfield one first.
Yes, Mr. Crutchfield. So the other day we were unpacking a big shipment at work, and throughout the process, can I name drop?
Can you name drop
Yeah.
who?
Alex.
Well, you just did.
Oh, hi, Alex. Alex was telling me, oh, someone's offering some snakes, and it happened to be Crutchfield with some random stuff. I don't really remember what it was, but I just as a question, because I love the Puerto Rican boa. That is how I prove that I'm Puerto Rican.
By owning a Puerto Rican.
I just
boa.
asked him, does he have any Puerto Rican boas? And then Alex asked for me. Crutchfield says yes.
Whoa.
I get super excited.
Hey.
And I start immediately trying to see if I can have the money for that. I did.
Hey.
So that was
If anything,
the first
I'll invest
big
too,
dub.
dude.
Oh my god.
100%. That's cool stuff, dude.
So I'm super excited because it happens to be a female.
Oh, nice. You only
Yes.
have the one female?
Apparently, it gets way
That's
better.
fate, dude.
It gets
story
so much
gets
better.
amazing.
Oh, fuck.
I was like, hey, what's the price looking like? $675. Only
Not bad.
$75 more than what I paid
Yeah,
for my
no,
mail.
not bad at all.
I'm happy. I'm excited. I get the pictures.
Is it an adult?
It's not an adult.
Okay, that's okay.
It is none other than
Is that a hypo?
a Sanzinia.
That is, damn it.
So,
Bro, let me tell you something. When I get the picture of the Sanzinia, I thought he was fucking with me.
Yeah.
I thought he was just exploring
Is
other things that he could have bought.
DMing you directly?
No, he's DMing Alex, and then Alex is sending the picture to me. So there is a middleman between this. So that's why I'm like, are you guys like playing?
Yeah.
Because like he even dropped the
say
scientific.
psych right now. Say psych
He
right
dropped
now.
the scientific.
He dropped the Latin, the incorrect Latin, but the Latin.
Yeah.
So he said Epicrates internatus, which is correct if you're back in the 80s. But
He is old.
he is old.
Yeah. He saw all the 80s.
He is Mr.
The
Crutchfield.
1880s, the
So this is-
1780s.
Mr. Crutchfield.
So a little bit of a background in between that.
Yeah.
Okay, so he asks.
No, but I'm mad. There's no way.
Wait, but okay.
Is he stupid or he thinks you're
That's
stupid?
what I'm about to explain.
He was on some shit, dude. There's no way.
No, I'm about to explain. So there's some confusion.
Okay.
So in the process of Alex asking for photos of the female Puerto Rican boa,
Yeah.
he just gets a litter of Sanzinia, which is getting posted everywhere. So when Alex
So he
goes,
just assumed it was
so
the
yeah,
Sanzinia.
because all of that stuff was going on. So he just gets a late night photo from Mr. Crutchfield of him holding a Sanzinia with a big
See,
smile
I
on
didn't
his
know
face.
this. I didn't know
Yeah.
this. So does he have him or not?
No, he obviously doesn't.
I don't
have
know.
them.
I don't know. But there was so much confusion, so much back and forth that I think everybody was just like, I think we just let it be.
Bro.
You know what? I think I know what happened. Alex just doesn't know how to spell Puerto Rican.
You're so stupid.
He's like, I think it's Madagascan, maybe? Madagascar?
Defeat in my soul when I looked at that picture. I was actually
Literally.
standing right over there.
Dude, that hype. It's like the thing that I'm looking for. Finally, it's so rare. No one has them. Wrong thing.
Yeah.
that's the wrong number.
Infuriating.
Yeah.
That is infuriating. I am so sorry.
Yeah.
Man.
So that happened. It's all right.
So sad.
I'm not very. I don't get excited super like. When I'm excited,
Yeah.
I don't. It doesn't look like it. So I'm just like,
He's excited right now, clearly.
no, I'm not.
Bummer, dude.
Oh, God.
I'm sorry.
Now you have one more story before we
Yeah,
get into
story time.
tarantula talk. It actually has to do with
It
tarantulas.
does have to do with
Bet.
tarantula talk.
Let's do it.
So I didn't give two shits about inverts at all.
Sad.
A little bit, yeah. Not that much though.
You keep a couple though.
Yeah, now.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about before.
Okay.
I started working here as a service tarantulas. I have to work with this guy. He starts
this guy,
being,
Tino?
fucking
Yeah.
Constantino Cano.
Yeah, remember, some people don't fucking watch the thing. They
All right,
listen.
well, stop driving. Get on your phone or
No.
your computer. Pull over to the side of the highway. I never do that. If you do that, you're responsible. I respect you.
Eric's over there like.
Especially when it's raining
Mom,
outside.
I'll be there for lunch.
Yeah. While I'm watching my videos. Anyway, I'm a safe driver, I swear. I have to start servicing stuff, and over time, I start getting used to it, and it's like, oh, this is cool. And then we get some scorpions in. I fall in love with a desert hairy. I took
bet.
one home. It's hairy as fuck. Yeah.
Hey.
His name is Bentley. I love him. And then I got into that. I got into scorpions, and then since he's all about tarantulas and shit, we start getting into rabbit holes, and I start looking at this and that, and then we get more tarantulas at the shop. So then we start working with different types, and then they're cool. They're not my favorite. They're still kind of like a subcategory, if anything.
Okay.
I do appreciate them. I do appreciate them a whole lot more than I used to. I ended up getting some Florida barks. I keep forgetting the scientific name of them.
Syncritis gracilis.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It matters to me.
They're going to hear more of that later.
And then what ends up happening next is that we get some spiders. They're little babies, and me, you, and
Somebody.
one of the people we know take them home because they're babies and we don't know what they are. It's like, oh, we're gonna raise them up and figure out what they are when they grow up.
I remember
and
this. They
see
were
who
sold to
has
us as
the cool
mystery
ones.
spiders, and we were like, "Hey, what are these? What does this mean?" And they were like, "We don't know. They're a mystery." I'm like, "How is that even possible? Who gave them to you? Ask them."
And that is one of the biggest problems.
It is a problem.
It is. Anyway, we all take one home, and we're raising them, and we're always joking about who's gonna kill theirs first. And it was almost me, many times. But just recently, I was servicing it. It did the good old,
Bye-bye.
It just went.
I was on the phone with you too.
He was on the phone.
I was on the phone with you
one of
when it
Yeah, it was
happened.
him. It was.
I was on the phone with you after.
No.
Yes,
no,
after.
Because
I was there when it was happening.
Yeah,
I
and
was
I had
driving
yes,
and it was
yes,
happening.
Yeah. I remember now. Dude, that whole situation was terrible because.
Well, wait. What did he say?
So he's like, "Oh, I'm servicing my stuff. I'm servicing the tarantula right now," and then I hear silence for like maybe 20 seconds. I'm like, "Hey, you good?" And then he's like, "It moved. It's gone." And I'm like, "Oh!" He's like, "I think I know where it is, though."
Se fue.
And then he's like, and then I hear like, "It's in the chair." I'm like,
It's in the chair. No, but dude, listen. I had this. Well, I still have it. I did put it back together. I have a really nice office chair. And I had to take it apart. And there's so many moving parts to this. They make these chairs specifically for spiders to get lost in.
Yep,
Because there's fabric over the wood of the bottom. So I had to cut the fabric out. But guess what the wood is?
What?
It's got a million little holes in it.
"Oh man!"
And inside of the wood piece, inside the chair, it's the cushion.
Yep.
So this motherfucker could be anywhere.
Anywhere in the
So
chair.
I'm like, all right, well, my life is over. I'm gonna lose this spider. I'm gonna lose the bet, and I'm gonna have a spider in my chair,
"Yep."
which I wasn't happy about. I didn't want to squish it,
Yeah.
I also didn't want to be surprised 2 years later with a big ass spider. Not that I'm afraid of them. It's just I don't like getting surprises.
They could survive too if you've got
Oh,
roaches or
100% would,
crickets
yeah.
getting loose. in your-
100% would.
True.
He 100% would have survived.
Yeah.
So I sit there for the next almost 3 hours putting this chair apart, and then it was so funny the way it happened. I flipped the seat and I just knocked on it and say, "Hello, can you please come out?" And guess what he did?
He's like,
He came out.
Yep.
So then I spent another 3 hours putting the chair together, and that was the night right before Animal Con, and I woke up in terrible shape.
"Yep."
I love spiders.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
I'm glad. Fun
Now,
stories.
Before we transition into your talk with Richard, is there anything that you would want to tell people that are listening that not like so much like homework, but just like want to explain something that you think that you guys spoke about that people won't understand?
So if you're a part of our audience, you hear us talk a lot about controversial issues, especially surrounding conservation, around wild caught, and around individual reptile husbandry. That same world, if not more extensively, exists in the invertebrate world. Because in the reptile world, you've got your major groups: snakes, turtles, lizards, and like I can't even think of another because those are like the general, all of them. Crocodilians, sure, whatever. Those are the general, all of them. In the insect world, the invertebrate world, it is a completely different ballgame. You've got beetles, you've got moths, you've got cockroaches, tarantulas, other kinds of arachnids. You've got a whole slew of other kinds of a whole slew of other kinds of organisms, and they have their own ethics surrounding their care. They have their own ethics surrounding of conservation, of wild caughts. That whole ball game exists there. So if you're really interested in like the controversy and the nitty gritty of what goes on behind the scenes of when you're buying an animal at a pet store from a breeder, I think this is going to be a pretty good talk for you guys, because you get to see like, hey, it's not just reptiles. This exists in every single aspect of captive animal husbandry.
Rock and roll, let's do it. There's nothing better than the smell of coffee in the morning, okay? There's also nothing better than the smell of reptiles in the morning. Psych. Reptiles with coffee. That's the smell you want. The strongest coffee, all right? We have it for you. Head on over to the description or go to coldbloodedcaffeine.com and use the code REPTILESWITH to get your Reptiles with coffee today.
My name is Richard. I'm from the Tarantula Collective. I make a lot of videos about tarantulas, scorpions, and pretty much just any kind of invertebrate out there.
Yeah, diving beetles. You've got isopods.
Yes, yeah, isopods. I've got a few snakes. I've got some colubrids and a ball python. Exciting, and kind of been. I'm not like into geckos, as like I'm not breeding them or making videos about them or anything. I've just always really liked geckos. So I've got like a couple leopard geckos and crested geckos and tokay geckos and day geckos.
Oh yeah, dude, that's scope stuff. But we had met at Animal Con. I had gone onto one of the panels thanks to Dion, and Dion hit us with one of these questions, and that's when I was like, all right, I gotta have Richard on the podcast. He had asked, he was like, it was something relating to wild caught invertebrates, how we take care of them, anything extra we do, the ethics surrounding them, like the whole thing. Obviously, when it was our turns, we gave our little soapboxes. I was wondering if you wanted to like delve into it a little bit. We touched like T. Celadonia species, blue death feigning beetles, the whole thing. Basically, like, what's your position versus on wild caught inverts?
Yeah, it's I don't want to say controversial, but I don't know how it is I kind of have a vague idea, but I'm not a reptile guy. I'm not in there on these conversations, so I don't know exactly how it works for you guys. But I know, especially in the tarantula hobby, because there's the invert hobby, just kind of like you had the reptile hobby, but then it splinters off into a bunch of different sections. You got people that just deal with jumping spiders, people that just deal with tarantulas, scorpion people, centipede people. You know what I mean? Like, you don't really go too far outside of their realm. So it kind of differs depending on what group you're talking to and what species we're talking about. When it comes to tarantulas, almost all of the species are endangered, threatened, near threatened, or at least at risk of becoming, one of those things pretty quickly. Yeah, they have a very long, I don't know if gestation period is the right word, because it feels like that's something for mammals, but it takes a long time, especially for like North American tarantulas. They live 20, 30 years, at least the females do. So it takes them a while to, maybe a decade or at least a year before they hit sexual maturity. And then those babies, it's going to take a long time before they hit sexual maturity. So you remove one, gravid female or even just a juvenile female out of the wild, like you're decimating generations of that species that, are no longer going to be thriving in that area. Yeah. They have a lot of babies, but they also have a whole lot of predators, and they're a very integral part of that food chain there. So when it comes to tarantulas, I'm totally against wild caught. And I also feel like there's so many people breeding them in captivity, like throughout the country, but also around the world, that there's, with the exception of a few like very rare or new species, there's no reason to be pulling them out of the wild other than greed. Like, people just know that for a female, I can, like an adult female, I can get $200, but if I breed her, I will only be able to sell the slings for 20. So, you got that kind of stuff going on. But when it comes to tarantulas, like the T. Celadonia, there's a couple other of those like species within that genus. And then, like the newly kind of described Chilibrachys species Electric Blue that now has a new name. We see these tarantulas like they show up in National Geographic or Time Magazine or, just some website. A new tarantula's been discovered or a new tarantula's been like scientifically described that is not in the hobby. It's almost like you can kind of hit a stopwatch and it's like how many days or weeks, months until it's available for sale. Exactly. And it's always, and especially like with Thailand and Brazil, those are two countries that have a lot of tarantulas, but have also kind of have blanket legislation that we're protecting all of these species. And not just, we're talking about all kinds of different animals. It pretty much just don't export them. So any animal that is exported and is available in the hobby that's recently been discovered was illegally smuggled out. So everything's tainted by, the fruit from the poison tree, or I don't know what that saying is. I just tried to use I tried to say like even if it's captive bred 4 generations, the initial ones were still pulled out of the jungles of Brazil or Thailand illegally.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ours kind of act like, but they're legal because they're grandfathered in or whatever reason. But you'll see them come from Europe. There's different laws, or maybe just the laws there aren't enforced. So you got a lot of people that will get these species and then kind of bring them into Europe, and they'll kind of go around through the countries there, and then they'll get exported. Sometimes they'll even do things like say that it's a different species than what it actually is.
Yeah,
because spiderlings are really difficult to tell apart unless you really know what you're doing.
No, for sure. Yeah.
You got that kind of stuff going on. But then there's the other side of the coin, which I kind of got into, not on that panel, but afterwards talking with someone else, because they were like complaining, like, well, will you support this guy? And he deals in wild caught species. And it was kind of like, yeah, but that's different because I'm talking about tarantulas that, in their kind of situation. But when you're talking about some, and not all, this isn't a blanket statement at all, but at least in North America, there are the Centroides species, like the bark scorpions.
The scorpions, yeah.
Yeah, they're just all over Texas and throughout the Southwest and down into Florida. And even in like Missouri and Colorado, and Louisiana, like they're everywhere.
All over.
That they're a pest. People are hiring companies to go out and just eradicate,
remove them. Yeah.
So in those situations where it's like, this is technically a pest that people are actively trying to exterminate. In that situation, it's like they're prolific breeders. They are not invasive, but they're to the level of a pest. So taking those wild caught is better than them being killed by poison.
Yeah.
Or people just smashing them or whatever they're going to do.
Yeah.
So like, when we're talking about bark scorpions or, some species of true spiders, like jumping spiders is a big one. Like almost any.
Yeah. All are wild caught
because there's so many of them. So it's not, maybe if it really ramps up, then it could become a problem. And I know people are breeding them in captivity. So there are some captive bred available, but it's just one of those things where it's like, you got to use some common sense and all wild caught are bad. It's like, well, the majority of it is, the lucrative parts are, but a kid that's catching, I don't want to say a kid catching a bark, but a kid catching a jumping spider, for the rest of its life. I don't think that is making a horrible impact on the environment.
Right. For me, it was, I had brought this up. I would said like, in my opinion, wild caught animals are not pets only. You can keep them and whatnot, but like your obligation, in my opinion, is to go ahead and breed that animal. There's no reason not to. If you are able to do it, then you can just release the babies. You can sell them for the pet trade, compete with poach prices, all these different things that you can do for them. But at the end of the day, you are removing that animal from their gene pool and not allowing that to proliferate in the wild, to keep going, and help the species to keep going. And with the scorpions specifically, me myself, I've have wild caught Centroides gracilis, Centroides hensi, because I really like that species. They're kept communally. They've got a pretty nasty sting. It's just really fun and all overall to have. And so for me, it's like, if they breed, go ahead, breed them together, release the babies back outside where I found them. It's just kind of a no-brainer. Might as well. I did take them from the wild. Might as well put them back. And then we brought up also like blue death feigning beetles, because that is one that's really, really caught on in the pet trade. A lot of people are keeping these beetles because they're cute, they're awesome, they've got fantastic behaviors, easy to keep. The problem is that they don't breed readily in captivity. And so because of that, a lot of people are just taking them out of the wild en masse. Having worked at different pet stores and seeing markets and whatnot, a lot of people take these in like in the buckets full. Like they just have
a whole bunch of these beetles. And while yes, it's like if you had a whole bucket of like palmetto bugs, sure, you're not going to impact like next to anything.
Sure.
But over time, money doesn't stop. It's just going to keep going until eventually habitat takes it down, or the people take down the habitats rather. And then now it's a central population. You've randomized the gene pool. You're taking animals out of that gene pool with the wild caught. It's a whole cycle that if nothing is checked, if you don't have anyone like, oh, I have some, I'm going to breed them and throw them back outside, then nothing really combats it, especially since a lot of citizen science is really limited. You had, I think, PhD candidate Becky O'Neill, I think, on your podcast earlier.
Correct.
I loved what you guys had to say. One of the specific things that I loved was that it's really hard for individual keepers to go ahead and work in citizen science, to go ahead and work in conservation studies, to submit data, to breed for reintegration programs. And it's like, it really is like this fence that like stops the conservationists from the keepers. It's really difficult.
I don't even think fence, at least in my field, I don't think fence is an apt description. It seems more like a canyon, like it's just massive ravine, and I can see them over there and they can see us. There's no way for us to connect, or there's just no common ground in between us, even though we're both very passionate about arachnids.
Yeah.
And part of that is like something you said earlier about taking these animals out of the wild and having an obligation to breed them and then reintroduce them in the wild. Like, when it comes to at least the science part of the tarantula hobby or the arachnids in general, that's a big no-no. Like if
right,
because there's no way for me to be like, I have no scientific accreditation, no reputation or anything like that. So if I say these, I swear these are a male and female of Faunopelma chalcodes, and I've bred them so they're pure Faunopelma chalcodes. I want to reintroduce them in the wild. They're like, no, that's a bad thing because they may be crossbred or they may be a different species. That can cause all kinds of problems, and like you see that with Poecilotheria, because they were really big in the hobby for a long time. Like a lot of those ornamental tarantulas from India and Sri Lanka. That was I have one behind me in my room that when I got it, it just was a Poecilotheria vittata, I believe. It was ornata, and now it's an endangered species. And
now they're endangered. Yep.
It's like, wow! Like just in the short time it's been alive in my basement, it went from non-protected to endangered, and there's nothing I can't take it across state lines. I can't move, essentially. I definitely can't sell it, so I can only breed it if I can find somebody with a male ornata.
And since you're in the States, it's like impossible to bring that animal back. You can't do anything even if they let you.
Like I'm in West Virginia, there's a handful of people that keep tarantulas here, so it's not like I'm in California or New York or Arizona or something where there's a bunch of us. So it sucks because it's like I feel an obligation to breed her, but it's like even if I did, all of those spiderlings would be stuck in the hobby because there's no way to get them to the scientific community.
And from our perspective, from the keeper perspective, we can really relate to the conservationist perspective, because a lot of keepers, like, they're messing up stuff. They're poaching animals, they're interbreeding, they're going ahead and hybridizing, morphs, all this different kinds of stuff that those animals can no longer go back for. And it's difficult to try to have a verification process to go ahead and vet certain people from being able to do it and not. But I mean, if a conservationist came up to you from, let's say, Indonesia, and they were like, hey, would you donate or would you dedicate a whole, let's say, a metal rack of just keeping this endangered species and then sending us egg sacs or sending us slings, grown adults, I'm sure you would have no problem being like, yeah, I would absolutely do that. I'll follow whatever rules you guys got for that. I want to be a
Yeah, 100%. And that's one cool. And I always get in trouble when I bring this up because I am not a man of the world. Like, I'm not extremely educated. I don't travel a whole lot. I kind of just live in the mountains of West Virginia, and I like it. But I read and I have the internet. So but sometimes there's just, propaganda. Like the government will say something and that's not actually what's happening. So the truth is somewhere in the middle, I suppose. But Mexican government, it does have a pretty cool program that I know some breeders and dealers, especially in the Southwest, are working with, where they will go out into the wild and capture a male and female of the same species, bring it into captivity to breed. She'll produce an egg sac. They'll return the mother and father back to the wild. They'll raise up that egg sac and then 50% of them is reintroduced into the location that they were originally removed from. The other 50% goes into the pet trade.
Yeah.
So they're making money. It's keeping this program alive. That is reintroducing and protecting the species of tarantula.
Yeah.
Some
I
people
think
say it's a scam and that's not actually happening, but people are conspiracy theorists.
Surprisingly, a similar program or tradition exists in Central American countries for sea turtles. Sea turtles are very, very high in the commodity for them over there. And so they fund a lot of market growth. And because scientifically speaking, only like, I don't want to throw out numbers, but like, let's say 10%, if only 10% survive scientifically, they are allowed to harvest, let's say up to 50%, because that then helps the people to go ahead and, fund their activities, go ahead and provide food for their families. At the same time, those people that want those sea turtles to come back next year, protect them, because they're like, hey, we don't want people messing up with our markets, with our way to sell this. We want to at least continue to get back the 50%. We need to ensure that they, continue to reproduce for next season when they come back. And so for like really cool. Inverts, it's super cool. It's, and then you could be like, well, you would want like 100% out there so that they could have the maximum chances for survival. But if scientifically they don't survive, like much with slings, a majority of them don't survive in the wild. Some of them, most of the time, don't even survive in captivity if you're not doing it properly.
Right.
Might as well. Why not?
Yeah. It's a really good. And I wish more countries would do that. Especially what's going on in India and Sri Lanka and Thailand and places like that. It's hard just because of I don't want to get into politics or anything like that, but a bunch of white guys in the US telling people how to manage their land is not going to go over well, and I don't blame them, but and so I feel like it's the responsibility of, at least with the arachnid keepers, to try and foster these relationships with researchers and scientists. And that's something that I try to do through my podcast and through other conversations I have with people, is try to bridge that gap, at least with the few people that are kind of willing to, and make some inroads. And it's like, I'm not going to change the world, but we can at least portray ourselves to the scientific community as something more than just people that want to keep spiders as pets.
Exactly. So for us, I don't know if you saw any episodes for our podcast, but one of the things that we try to promote is like this organization that we want to get off the ground. It's called KFC. It stands for Keepers for Conservation, where essentially right now it's just kind of us right now, where we want to funnel funds. If anyone wants to donate, we funnel funds to specific conservation organizations that we enjoy. Let's say the Orient Center here in Florida. We have the Panther Society, all these different places that go ahead and can take some of this money. And eventually we want to get it to a point where it's basically like what, to an extent, what Europe kind of has a little bit more, with stud books, with lineages present, going ahead and doing a little bit more of that citizen science, that people can do more things like that. Especially since, I think some of the most brilliant minds, not to say anything about scientists or anything, but some of the brilliant minds for breeding these species come from hobbyists, come from people that aren't paid to do it. They're just like, I just like this so much, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Knowledge is one thing, but passion is something else, sometimes you can be passionate enough about something that you're on par with experts in the field. And that was one of the cool things I've liked talking to the few scientists that I've kind of been able to, sit down and discuss things with. They're generally nice people and very intelligent, but for them to kind of pay me a compliment. Like I had a professor, Dr. Loafman from West Liberty University, came by and was kind of checking the place out. And I was nervous because I was like, he's in charge of his zoology department. He's going to be wanting like the highest tier care and husbandry. And, so I was like, and I know he knows about snakes, but I also have some reptiles. And I don't know. I was nervous that he was going to kind of come in and just roast me, or like, you're doing this wrong. But he was very complimentary. I'm like, this is a better setup than most zoos I go to have. So that made me feel really good. And like, I'm better. I can give my animals a better life than, a major zoo is. So that,
winning.
Not bragging on myself, but just trying to show an example of like how passion can be better in some cases than knowledge.
I like to bring up this, it's not an official term, but like how sometimes there is like an animal racism present, or stigmas really, where if you wanted to make an organization to protect pandas or dolphins, easy. People will throw money at you. You'll have no problem doing that. But if you wanted to go ahead and talk about, conserving mantid species in Florida, people are going to be like,
I don't want them here at all. Why would I want to conserve them? And then that makes it more difficult to get people passionate about them. It makes it hard for people in their own homes to go ahead and protect these animals. You know, like, oh, if you see them, don't squish them, whatever. You know, it's like, it's so difficult. One of the things that I saw, so I like a lot of insect pinning. I'm getting really behind that. I joined a couple of insect pinning groups on Facebook and on Instagram or whatever, and I saw some pictures that really startled me. Some of them were from like Indonesian sellers, African sellers, where they have like basically storage bins full to the brim of deceased insects, you know, that they will ship to you, they'll sell to you wholesale, whatever, you know. And I'm like, for me personally, for the specimens that I go ahead and pin up, I only collect dead specimens, or if they're invasive, I'll have kill jars ready for them, and I have no problem doing that. But for natives, for things I find alive, I'm like, nope, I let you go ahead and reproduce, do your thing. So when I see buckets full of insect carcasses, I'm like, there's no way you found all those dead. There's no way you found perfect specimens dead. You found them alive and then killed them, and now shipping them out, which is no different than poaching. But good luck telling people that, you know, and getting them behind stopping that.
Yeah, and that's something I think some people don't realize when they start getting into that aspect of invertebrates, is that even if it's dead, it still can be illegal to ship into the U.S. Like, you know, like that could be a very big issue. Like, you could end up in jail over some of that stuff. You know, depending on the species and the situation. But it's like, you know, people. I've seen a couple of people have, you know, maybe a butterfly they shouldn't have, or a couple of rhinos. It's like some of them are cool, but there are some species it's dead or alive. No. Allowed to bring.
Exactly. I know Europe has a lot of rules like that, where I think there was a new species of butterfly that came out, and prices fetched in like the thousands of dollars for a dead butterfly. I'm like, that's crazy. That's insane.
But yeah, I mean, that's just incentivizing people to go out and kill them and sell them online. It's
exactly.
It's even worse than pets, I think.
Yeah. And you know, so on our show, we like to talk about a lot of controversial issues like free handling, conservation versus pet keeping, racks versus enclosures, that whole thing. But it's very rare that people get to talk about invertebrate ethics. You know, one in particular that really is like kind of insane to me, and how there's like literally no one talks about it. There's no regulation for it at all. It's the release of invasive species with regards to invertebrates. And it's crazy how just possible it is. You know, people are, especially in Florida, it's a high reptile community. People are breeding roaches like it's nothing, you know. And then all of a sudden, if someone was like, I don't really want my culture anymore, I'm just going to dump them outside, let them do their thing, you know, or if they wanted to do that with, let's say tarantulas. I think there are now invasive tarantulas populating in South Florida.
So look, Vaughan's is in Central Florida, Titusville area, in Orange. Yep. They've been there since the 70s, but they're thriving, and they did not appear there. But it's very similar conditions to where they are in the Yucatan Peninsula. So yeah, they're doing very well. But yeah, that was not that was not natural.
It's insane. It's crazy how like nobody talks about even isopods. I always tell people, so I really love isopods, and I always tell them, I'm like, if you don't want your colony anymore, you have to freeze it. You have to freeze the dirt that you put them in, or put the whole bin in the thing.
Like when I first, I was like the roly polies, but I was Russ from Aquarium Max Pets, great guy, knows.
Yep, he's great.
All kinds.
I love Russ.
Isopods. But when I was talking to him, he was telling me about all the different permits and for different states and their isopods. Man, he's like, they can destroy native plants and crops, and he's like, they can. It's just like in Europe, it's a big thing, especially in the UK. They feed their tarantulas like katydids, like, you know what I mean? I feel like that's not
or grasshoppers, whatever.
It's just like really big grasshoppers, and whether that's not what they call it. I think they're locusts. That's what they are.
Oh, okay.
They're big locusts, and we can't have them here. Like,
no,
it's like because they will destroy the Midwest, and it's an amazing feeder. And they look really cool, and the tarantula, there's a lot of vitamins and minerals, and it'd be perfect.
They're awesome. They're fantastic feeders.
Yeah, but they, you know, a couple of those get out, and then we have a plague of locusts.
Yep. It's like the same thing with isopods. Isopods can do the same thing. You get isopods in a certain. I've seen isopods cover fields, you know, just because the soil is so good. They're finding the food that they need, and they're just up to the tippy tips of grass, just eating everything.
Wow, I've never seen that, but yeah, I can imagine. You know, especially with some of the other invasive insects. But yeah, when it comes to controversial, like the cool thing about tarantulas is that, with the exception of South Florida and some of the southern parts of Texas and then the whole Southwest, but when you're talking about like tropical species and stuff, where I live, they can be invasive. Like if they got out, they're not going to survive the winter. The first time it freezes, they're not going to find a mate. It's just not something that I really worry about. But that's not when it comes to true spiders, like widows. Like I'm very careful with widows because I know that in my state we only have the southern black widow. The Latrodectus moctans, and there may be a few other venomous spiders that, all spiders are venomous, but you know what I mean, like something that's got some kind of bark, some
a little more medical.
So if I have any Latrodectus species that's non-native here, I'm always super careful because I know if the moctans can survive, then all these other species can.
All these other ones can.
And we're seeing that with there's an issue with the brown widows that were an invasive spider that's knocking out the black widows, and it's like, and that's just because it somehow managed. And then there's that. I don't know. We can go on and on about spiders. It's definitely a problem. And for a long time, I didn't have any roach feeders. I just bought crickets and tried to make crickets and did mealworms because I didn't want my house to get overrun by crickets, or not by crickets, but by roaches. My wife did.
By roaches.
Be free. She was like, no roaches.
Roaches
in my kitchen. And so I came here and I have my own studio and I'm not at home. Technically I could get red runner roaches if I want, but I just know how invasive they are and how
insane they are.
One female gets out and this whole, shopping center I'm in is going to have, these red runner roaches. So I stick with dubias. At least up here, they're not going to be breeding like they maybe in Florida, but
I mean, you know what I always like to say, life finds a way. Right now, there's, with all the legislation on in Florida and all that stuff, a lot of people are saying like, oh, what species can't survive in Florida? What species just can't be here at all? I usually like to tell them, there's basically nothing. There's basically nothing. I know people that keep crested geckos outside completely.
Oh wow.
And it's like, what if a crested gecko can survive out in Florida? Anything can. Really, anything can.
Sure. And if you take everything I just said with a grain, just forget that. Pretty much any tarantula species could survive in somebody's house. They're not gonna get out in nature and reproduce, but that is if a spider were to get loose, like at home. I'm not so much worried that it's going to go out in the woods and overtake a native species, but it could live 20 years in my house just because it's
just walking around eating bugs.
If I ever sell my house, I may have to disclose maybe a couple of tarantulas in the walls. I don't know.
Yep. It's wild. It's crazy. People don't talk about inverts ever. It's so sad.
It's a shame. We're a very underrepresented community, but that's changing. Like it's been crazy the past 3 years. Just the fact that any of us got invited to Animal Con both years, I think was a big step. You got channels like Exotic Slayer and Dark Den, like the big ones, 500,000 or millions of subscribers, and they get a lot of crap from people in our community, but it's like they are the ones responsible for it blowing up right now. And I say that in comparison to like the reptile hobby, it's probably a drip in the bucket, but it's just my Facebook group I started, and I was like, if we ever break 5,000, I'm going to be impressed. And now we're almost 40,000.
And you're the only one, I think, in my head that goes ahead and promotes conservation efforts, and if more people were to do that, then the people that are starting to get into tarantulas, the people that, because in the reptiles or in birds even, or fish especially, there's a lot of old heads that go ahead and rule over the industry, and their way of doing things is kind of the current way of doing things. But with tarantulas and all these inverts being kept, those people can then, the new people can go ahead and really shape the future. They can go ahead and promote good keeping. They can promote conservation efforts, and so that way we don't have the same problems as we do with other aspects of animal keeping.
And that's a kind of an interesting. That exists in the tarantula hobby as well. There are old like that. I'm considered a controversial person in the tarantula hobby because part of the reason is because I advocate so much for conservation. That's bad for business. It's making the tarantula dealers look bad, and they don't like that, and it's an issue. And there are people that have been keeping since the 70s and the 80s, and 90s, and they have their way of doing things. And if you suggest maybe we should keep this animal in a more naturalistic or God forbid a bioactive setup,
they lose their brains. They lose it.
sterilite box, cocoa fiber, a toilet paper tube for a hive. That's all they need. It's like that's no animal should live like that.
No.
Roaches have better accommodations than that. They're feeders.
Yeah.
If you want to support us, head on over to modernreptileshop.com or in the description where you can find our merch. And the best part is that a percent of the proceeds from the merch gets donated to conservation. One more time, that's modernreptileshop.com or head on over to the description.
When we are at the panel for AnimalCon, I had brought up a roach species that was endemic to a certain cave system. I ended up looking it up because I was like, no, I need to figure out what it was. It was the Simondoa conciferium, named so because of the Simondoa cave systems in Guinea, and the species name conciferium because of how vital it was to conserve them. You know, they were only endemic to this one cave system, and then because of the mineral ore within the cave systems, they were harvested. They completely wiped out that system. And now the only extant members of that species are in museum collections. Yeah. And it's like, that can happen with anything. That can happen with any species. Granted, pest species, it's going to be really hard. But if you look at like, I don't know if you know, aware of like the Hercules beetles in the States, like Dynasty species, amazing species. I just recently realized that they were in Florida. I was like, I've never seen one before, right?
Yeah.
And so when you talk about a species like that, a species that is very, very not often seen alive, you know, it would be so easy to completely wipe out that species if you really wanted to.
It's very true. And they're constantly in danger because there's other species similar to that could very easily outcompete them in other countries that is highly illegal to import into the US or to keep pets in the US. And I'm not going to bust anybody out, but somebody contacted me a couple of weeks ago. Person's a fan and they were trying to do something nice and they wanted to send me some really cool beetles. And I was like, tell me which species they are first, because I know that there's a good chunk of them that are highly illegal. And all except for one species, there was one native species that I could keep. The rest of them would, I mean, in my mind, it's a felony to transport them.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's actually a felony, but I was just like, no, dude. Like, I'm not. Maybe you get somebody else to do it, but I kind of got a spotlight on me right now, even if it's a small one, and I'm not gonna be that guy. I don't want to do that, and I definitely don't.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing because I am, like I said, I went to school for music and sociology. Like science was something I did not like because it had math in it. There's algebra, no. So on biology, no. And so it wasn't until, you know, I always liked tarantulas. That's why I got into them was in college, but I never thought science or biology would ever be something I would be interested in. And now here I am, and that, like, it's pretty much all I read is, you know, it's not textbooks, but it's articles and it's reports and research papers and things like that when I'm studying for videos and trying to get ideas and just learning. And it's frustrating because I feel like I missed out. Like, I could have so much knowledge if I learned this, and then I could be able to communicate better. But, you know, when it comes to a lot of the invasive species and conservation in particular, like, I want to be involved in conservation. And I think as a community, it should be a main focus. If we're keeping these pets because we love them, then we should also want to protect them in the wild. Like, that just makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like that anybody from the outside looking in, if we're not doing that, they're going to be like, they don't give a damn about conservation. They want to take animals out. And even if that's not the case, that's what we're portraying to the rest of the world. And I think that's a bad look also. It really frustrates me that I don't have the knowledge to be able to do anything really more than just kind of talk about it and promote it. Like, I tried to get into tarantula conservation. I'm sorry, I mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
I reached out trying to find there's no organizations that particularly protect tarantulas. So I would get suggested, we'll protect, try to contribute to this organization that protects this like huge, land areas or something like that. Tarantulas live in there. And it's like, yeah, but they don't care about them. Like, that's not their, it just happens to accidentally protect the tarantulas too.
Yeah. And
then some of those conservation organizations I reached out to essentially said, because you create content about keeping these animals as pets, we don't want anything to do with you. And that kind of shocked me. I was just like, whoa, really? Like, I'm offering to give you money and you're turning it down.
It's crazy. It really is a huge like canyon, like you said. So being in Florida and wanting to go ahead and, do a little bit more, I volunteered at the OCIC, the Orient Center for Indigo Conservation, and it's conserving indigo snakes. They're a species that almost only in Florida, a little bit of Alabama, a little bit of Georgia, but their numbers have depleted significantly because of land development, because of poaching, because of a whole bunch of slew of issues. In this center, while I was there, we had adult indigo snakes, both in outdoor and rack enclosures. We bred them, paired them together, kept extensive records of the feeding, of the sheds, of who was paired to who to ensure non-breeding or non-inbreeding, all that stuff. And the way that it was done, honestly, like besides paperwork, which really isn't hard, there was not much extra to do different than in pet keeping. So obviously, if you're a snake keeper, a lot of people know how to keep racks. Not that hard. And if you're doing outdoor enclosures, a lot harder for sure. But people are already doing that. People are already keeping snakes outdoors, you know. And if you wanted to enrich enclosures, if you want to do tanks indoors, vision cages indoors, the whole thing, you could absolutely do that. And so the only thing that was of any difference really, well, besides biosecurity was a big one, because obviously if you're releasing animals back outside, you need to be keeping records that all your animals are healthy. You don't want to be spreading things in between. The second thing was data collection, was literally just writing down what you're doing, what you're seeing when it happens. You know, if people could do that with tarantulas and their native species, or native inverts in general, you could do assassin bugs, mantids, cockroaches, isopods, whatever. The world is your oyster. Pick which one. You know, if, like, let's say every single person who was passionate about these animals was able to keep native species in their homes, reproduce them, and then put them back outside with records that they could share across the world.
Sure.
What could stop us? What really could stop us? And then if that money that if you wanted to go ahead and work with the captive hobby, you could easily get some of that money, generate it for those conservation efforts to protect that land. You could hit so many benchmarks if people just, I don't know, if people just decided to do it.
Sure. And I think that's something that I kind of talked about, something similar in the podcast you referenced earlier with Becky, which she and I were talking. I mentioned the Arachnophiles app, because that's kind of something that we were doing. Like I was wanting to build an app. This guy was also building an app, and we were like, let's kind of like put our heads together. And he did like all the work. I mean, he built the app. I just gave ideas and bounced on. Like, I don't want to take any credit for that, but it's a cool app. And part of, like, I was like, my contribution to it was just wanting to be able to have somewhere where we're not taking people's personal data, but we can access how often, like, we can look up a species and see on general how often are they eating, how much are they eating, when do they molt this remote cycle. Like, we can have all these individual keepers that are just wanting to kind of keep track of their own animals and are inadvertently helping build a database where we can, we'll just have tons of data on how these tarantulas live in captivity and what people are feeding them and how long they live. And there's all kinds of interesting, but it's just like getting that data together is, maybe nobody's going to use it now, but in 20 years, science would be like, that's invaluable information.
Yeah. One of the classic things is pinnings. Insect pinnings, they do survive decades into the future because of just how hardy the exoskeleton of these animals are. And so people always say, like, hey, if you're going to go ahead and pin insects, please, when you do it, pin the location that you got it, who pinned it, the date that you got it, all that stuff, and the species. So that way in the future, if anything changes, people can still use those specimens and you can still use those collections as like kind of windows into the past to see how they looked. And that's like nuts to me. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. You can have collections from like the 1800s of butterflies and beetles, and they look different than now. It's like, wow, that's insane.
And that was kind of what got me into what I do now is, I just really like the way tarantulas and spiders look, and I wanted to photograph them and was taking pictures with my phone. And that kind of evolved into making videos and getting better camera equipment and learning how to use it and stuff. But like deep down, like I just really, when I would search for an image of a tarantula or especially video of a tarantula, there's not a lot.
Impossible. Yeah.
Even now, like I work really hard getting some clips, and some of them are pretty, like, they're halfway decent. I'm like Adobe or one of these like B-roll kind of stock footage sites like that have hardly any tarantulas would love this, and they constantly turn me down. Like, we have no demand for spider. But I'm like, one day these shots are going to be having like macro video of tarantulas moving, especially if they end up going extinct. Like, that's going to be not
invaluable.
Yeah, but not like monetarily invaluable. It's not going to make me rich,
No,
but
right.
it's going to be a contribution to humanity. You know,
Exactly.
and it's
Yeah. It's sad because it's in the early stages right now. You know, we're not concerned about the future right now because things are good. Things are fine. You know, for a lot of species, there's no worry. The problem is that people don't know what the future holds. And, you know, people will surprise you. You know, I think I said on,
I think that's
I think
what's
I said
interesting about tarantulas is that that's not the case anymore. Like every couple of months, there's another report. This species is now threatened or near threatened. Like it's at least with the spiders, it feels like they're falling off a cliff. And if that falls, it's kind of like you got to save the honeybees. You know, you also got to save the spiders. If the tarantulas die, like that's like pulling out the rug from an ecosystem. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's just it's going to get way out of balance, and hopefully nature will be able to rebalance itself. But it could be cataclysmic.
You know, bees get a lot of love. Bees get a lot of love. Probably not as much as they should, but like whoever was PR for bees, they did a fantastic job because they're like, bees are good, guys. We need the bees, and it's like, you know, it's probably the bee movie. That's what it did it.
Freaking Jerry Seinfeld strikes.
Yeah. He did it. He saved the bees. But it's really like with spiders, it's gonna be so hard. It's so hard. Jumping spiders now get a little bit of love. But if you wanted to help people, like, guys, we need to start conserving black widows, L-mactons. Nobody's gonna get on that train. Nobody.
Yeah, but jumping spiders are like the gateway drug to the arachnid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like
That
that first time you know, it's you get they're cute, they're harmless, they're intelligent, they you know, they're very low maintenance, and then you know you get a couple of those, and then they're just something, I don't know, and maybe you've experienced, but there's just something when you really look at an arachnid, especially especially tarantulas or spiders, but you know, pretty much any arachnid, it just they're so alien and fascinating, and just the way they move and think and react is so different than anything you've ever experienced yourself or has seen anything else experience. It becomes like intoxicating, almost like it's very captivating, and you're like, I need to learn more, and I want to see more. And then I can't tell you how many people I have talked to that have been like, I got my first jumping spider and was looking for stuff online and came across your channel. Now I own 20 tarantulas. You know? So
it's so easy. It is so easy. Yeah,
it's fascinating. Now scorpions, on the other hand, that's not something I like them, but it's not something I suggest people like jump into.
No, right. You know, with scorpions, I didn't like scorpions at first. I really didn't, just because they were mostly solitary. Some of them were too finicky that if they sensed even the slightest bit of movement, they didn't want to eat. So I was like, I hate this. I don't want any part of this. Except when I got into the Synchroides, the Tidius species, the ones that are communal, then I was like, whoa, actually, that's actually pretty cool. I do like those.
Yeah, the Synchroides they were probably my first love. Like I think like my first tarantula was like a freaking Asian forest scorpion, and then an emperor scorpion. Like started out like most people do. And then quickly was like, no, I need a bark scorpion. Like, bark scorpion. I want an Arizona, and I want a stripe bark or Texas bark, whatever y'all.
Yeah. I think people also get into like the toxicity of it. They're like, oh, I want the more dangerous, the more deadly, that kind of thing.
That's not me though. Like I mean, just it was funny at Animal Con because we were sitting around the pool and there was a bunch of reptile guys like kind of having I don't know what I can say on your podcast. I'm gonna be honest.
Whatever.
I was like, oh shoot, I don't know if I can do that.
Say whatever.
But it was like a dick measuring contest. Who recently handled the most venomous snake or whatever. And I'm like, we're sitting around like every animal we work with is venomous. Like like maybe they're not as dangerous as like a black mamba.
No, right.
They'll hurt you. They'll send you to the hospital.
Still good enough to make like a grown man cry, and that's enough.
I just got stung like Friday by Synchroides scopulatus, the Arizona bark scorpion, like the most venomous in the U.S. And the guy that sent him to me told me he got stung by the striped bark scorpion. It's a Texas bark, like while he was packing him up to send to me, and I was like, no, I'll be careful. Like they're feisty, but like the scorpions, they're not aggressive. They're not coming after me. They're trying to get away from me. And the only reason I got stung is because I was not paying attention to what I was doing. And there was 7 of them in an enclosure, and I only had eyes on 3, and just assumed 4 more were at the bottom. And I shoved some moss into a little crevice, and then I just this tiny little stinger coming out of the moss. Bam, bam. Got twice on the tip of my finger, and I don't know if I've experienced that level of pain in a long time. And it lasted, man. It was like an acid trip. It was like, well, I'm gonna be with you all weekend. And And I
I
was
always
like,
like
when I talked to Nate, he said he got stung by the Texas bark or the striped bark and the Vittatus. And he's like, he's felt better. He's like, a couple hours, it was fine. The next day I was better. He's like, it hurt like crazy, but it's like, dude, it's 24 hours in. I can't feel all the way up to my elbow. And armpits hurting. I'm afraid it's coming to my heart. Like, am I going to die? You're not going to die. It's just going to suck all weekend.
Yeah. I used to work at a shop in Gainesville next to UF, basically like 5 minutes away. And people would come in and they're like, well, the rules for the dorms are I can't have anything longer than 4 feet. So what do you got? And I'm like, well, we got centipedes. Like that was the rule. You can't have anything. You can't have a corn snake. But if you want like a Vietnamese giant centipede, no problem. Go for it.
That's how I got a tarantula, man. Like I wanted a pet. And I also was like, pretty much they were like, when I wanted to get a pet for the dorm and I couldn't even have a beta fish. They're like, no kind of aquarium that holds water. They had a whole paragraph that pretty much excluded all pets. But I was talking to a professor about my fear of spiders and he was like, you should get a pet tarantula. I was like, no, we can't have pets in the dorms. He's like, well, the tarantula, like invertebrates kind of fit a loophole. Like they're in an aquarium, but it's not filled with water and there's no heat. There's no heat rock. There's no heat pad. Like pretty much they're like a house plant. And I was like, all right. And no problems. So inverts are a great pet for the dorms.
So with it's interesting too, because like we were talking about venomous snakes in Florida, a lot of rules against venomous snakes, can't keep them, nothing. But you want to go to your local reptile shop, you want to go ahead and get a death stalker scorpion, no one's gonna stop you. Go for it. Do whatever you want. And it's like that's kind of crazy. Like nothing stops like 4-year-old Timmy from coming in and just taking one.
Right. We have that issue with androctonous species a lot. Like I think its Latin name translates to man killer, something like that. Don't quote me on that, but I feel like that's right. And anyway, that's like they're like the fat tail scorpions, the ebony fat tail scorpion, the Egyptian fat tail. Like I've got a couple of those, and like I think I got 2 adults and 2 like scorpions. And in my mind, I know that that's really venomous and could potentially kill me, let alone more than likely just send me to the hospital, at least pain and stuff. But like that, I don't even get an adrenaline rush when I work with them because they're so calm and not aggressive. You know what I mean? Like usually they're so still. Like I was trying to like, usually it's in this burrow and I'm like, oh shit, it's on top of its burrow. Like that's how people are gonna get stung, not because it's like a snake. It's usually you do something dumb and you get a dumb prize like I just did Friday, and it's still I still can't feel the tip of my finger as I'm talking to you. It's my ear up.
It's just dumb. I always tell people like, if you want to thrill, get an OBT, get a huntsman. There's your thrill right there. You don't need anything else.
And some people are like kids. Like I went to a pet's reptile expo, and it was not a respectable one. It was kind of like we were driving on a road trip, and I saw
I don't really like a lot of them either.
It's like reptile show $5. Like, oh, let's check it out. And it was terrible. And there was a guy selling some snakes, and he didn't even have like a tablecloth on his table. You know what I mean? So it tells you the level.
So rinky dink.
This was just stained, broken wooden tables at the
garbage
place. And so it was more like the whole thing was more like a flea market.
Oh no!
You know what I mean? It was just tables with like just random stuff on it, and I don't know if anybody was advertising the name of their business. It was just weird. And he had some tarantulas, and all it said, I'm trying to remember, I think it just said like starburst tarantula or something like that. And I was like, what is this? And he's like, you can open it up and take a look. And it was like one of those little like kind of 4 ounce or 8 ounce deli cups, like a normal size, but not very deep. I open it up, and it's a Toga starburst baboon, like a heteroscalata macula. Like like one of the most defensive and venomous species. It's like we don't really know what the most venomous tarantula is, but that's
right.
It's in the run with the Postlidae metallica and some others, and feather leg baboon, and scared the crap out of me because I was just like, open it up and I see that and I shut it. I'm like, you're just letting anybody open this thing up? Like it comes by and you're like, oh, it's just a spider, it's not gonna hurt you. Like I could kill a kid. Like what? They're fast and they don't like light. And I was like, this you don't know what you're doing. You're gonna hurt somebody. So,
it's crazy. It is crazy. Inverts. I think it's really because people aren't into them. People aren't learning about them. But hopefully, and it is changing. It is changing. A lot of people are getting into it a little bit more. I hope it's
but I do know. I wanted
thing.
to say this. I want to make sure that I get this in here.
Yeah.
Everybody that I know that sells Hottentotta, Titimus, and Androctonus, like any of those like really venomous species.
Yeah.
At least the respectable people that I deal with, none of them will sell them to anyone under the age of 18. And then usually if you're just a random person buying it, they won't sell it to you unless you kind of, they have a conversation with you and know that you understand what it is you're dealing with and how to take it.
Yeah.
Like at least they're being responsible about it.
Yeah. Working at a reptile store, I do the same thing. Like there are technically no rules, but I will always, I'm not afraid to tell someone, you're not that guy. You're not that guy, pal. You're not ready for this. My first tarantula was actually the recently changed Heliobrachus electric blue. And it was all right. It was fine. I'd worked with them before. Like I'd worked with tarantulas already before. And then I was like, I'll finally get one. For me, it's more behavior though. Yeah, it was my first. But for me, it's more behavior because I'm like, I never see this thing. This thing is almost always in the dirt. It's the most active of fossorial tarantulas. I will give it that. But still, I was like, I want something that's out like all the time. I want to be able to look at it and be like, oh, look, there it is. Always eat the whole thing. So then I traded it for a G pulchra, and I'm way happier with that one.
Nothing against. I mean, right now I got nothing against fossorial tarantulas, but every 4 months or so, I just kind of throw my hands up in the air. I'm like, no more fossorials. Like we're not taking any more in. Might even get rid of the ones I have. I'm sick of dealing with them, and they don't do anything. But that's the problem. They don't do anything. It's just I've got a bottom row that's just a bunch of enclosures with dirt, and every now and then I'll see some legs, and that's just not exciting. And then when I like to film them. And exactly. How can I ethically film a tarantula in a burrow like that? I usually have to wait until I need to rehouse it, or because it's outgrown its burrow, or outgrown its enclosure, or its enclosure has become just like riddled with mold or mildew, or there's an issue, so it needs a new home, because that's extremely stressful to the spiders. It is, really just destroying their entire universe and setting them in a new one that they've got to figure it all out because they don't see well. It's just it's traumatic. So I try not to do that unless I need to, and then so like that's the opportunity to film them. And if they're like pre-molt or something, and they're not really moving around a lot, and they're really like, I just did a video on the Chilibrachia species electric. But it's name changed. And people are like, the tarantula's not black. I'm like, well, yeah, she's in pre-molt. So it's like, I could wait until she molts, but I needed to change her enclosure. And this it seemed like perfect timing. And I had a male and a female, and I was like, oh, this is going to be great. But didn't have that like dark black and extremely bright color she would have after a molt, or even for months after a molt. It was like, right. She's probably molting right now. Like that's how dark. Like she was almost gray. So disappointing. Yeah. A lot of people want the. It's the same reason I don't like centipedes either. It's a lot of the times it's like, I want to feed you. You felt the enclosure move. You don't want to eat anymore. Why am I trying? Yeah, and then they like I've had a centipede for like a year, and I'm like, it's got to be dead. Like it just I haven't seen it in a year, and I haven't seen anything move. And sometimes I'm throwing in crickets and roaches, and they're not getting eaten. So I'm gonna dig it out and do like a wellness check, and then it almost bites me. It's like running around like crazy. I'm like, how are you still alive? But then other times I'll have one. I'm like, oh yeah, that one's fine, and then I'll lift up a cork bark and it's dead. I'm like, I don't get you all. Like no. You just never see them. But when you do see them, man, they are so cool. They are so cool. The best thing is seeing them eat. That's the best thing. Yeah. But it's a passion. That's a passion. Not like, a have it for a year, and you may see them once or twice. Yeah. Like, are you okay with it? Well, I think I touched everything that I wanted to go ahead and hit. Is there anything you wanted to go ahead and throw out there, chat with me about? Go ahead and plug your stuff. Yeah, I mean, I got a podcast. It's the Exotic Pet Collective. So there's like a YouTube channel. You just search the Exotic Pet Collective anywhere that you listen to podcasts, and you can find it. It's kind of like, I talk to other content creators. I also try to bring on scientists and researchers, and just kind of get a wide mix of people, both from the invert and the reptile hobby. But there also potentially could be, fish people or birds. I mean, it's exotic pets. So yeah, go for it. I tried to keep it as broad as possible. But now I'm uploading those not on the second YouTube channel, but on my main channel, because they seem to be better there now that YouTube has a podcast section. So you can find them there on the Tarantula Collective. But yeah, and then I'm on Instagram and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things I want to do with the podcast is talk a whole lot more about the science aspect and the conservation aspect, and
Yeah.
We're equally pushing conservation for these species in the wild, because I just really think that's important. And but also taking better care of the ones we have in captivity, and trying to give them the best naturalistic enclosures that we can. Bioactive is that's one of those people, like, they don't need a bioactive. It's like, well, nature is bioactive. They live in nature. And there is benefits to it, especially with humidity regulation, because tarantulas are really easy to take care of, but some of them require a higher moisture level. Like, they need more air, but not so. But it's just weird the way that they do it compared to reptile. I can't just hook up a fogger and it's a chameleon or something, and it's going to get that humidity. Like, it needs, it's a whole different thing. Be seeping up from the ground in a sense. It's one of those, like, they want to get cooler, they're going to burrow down. So you got to have, heat. It's got to be warmer at the top and cooler on the bottom. It's drier at the top, moisture in the butt, because when they need more humidity, usually they'll burrow down the earth. So, we got to think about how they act in nature and try to replicate our enclosures to better suit them.
100%, for sure.
And I'm the podcast coming out next is with Marshall Arachnids, who is a huge, like, he has his history is in zoology and working with animals, mainly like geckos and amphibians and stuff like that. But he's taking what he learned working in zoos and going to school and is applying it to tarantulas. And he's getting a whole lot of pushback, because he's suggesting things like heat lamps and hot spots and temperature gradients and, like, the stuff that you talk about when it comes to reptiles that for many years has been I have videos. It's like, tarantulas are not reptiles. We cannot keep them as reptiles. And that's true. A lot of the products they sell at you at pet stores that are made for reptiles are, dangerous or just be a waste of money when it comes to spiders. But there are some aspects of our husbandry that needs to advance. Take on some of those aspects, like having bioactive setups, having naturalistic setups, having temperature gradients, having humidity gradients, like that.
All of it, the whole thing.
Natural common sense. It's not. I'm not saying we got to have a specific UVB light that's costing $1,000. The tarantula doesn't need that. It's not going to use that.
One of my favorite things about reptile or husbandry in general is, like, there's tiers. There's obviously, like, give the animal food and water, give the animal space, but at the top of the pyramid of, like, the top of the hierarchy of needs, I guess, is choice. The last thing you can give your captive animal is choice. And a lot of the times, a lot of people don't think that tarantulas can make choices. And it's like, no, they obviously can. If they are in somewhere too bright, you always see a tarantula. I want to be in the dark. They stop when they go ahead and it's darker for them. A lot of too hot, they want to get away from it.
I'll have two different hides, because I know, like, I want them to be in the right side of the enclosure, but that's just for my aesthetic purposes. Like, that there's no real value to what side they. No, so, I give them multiple ones, and they almost always have a preference. And especially, like, with my large tarantulas, like the Theraphosa sturmii I have, it has two burrows. It's almost always in the one on the right, and I think that's because it's a little bit like with the misting systems hooked up and the lights, the way the plants are growing. It's kind of a darker and drier in that area. But there's still moist and humid in the entire enclosure. So it's like it's found its little microclimate within that small enclosure that it really likes, and that's where it chooses to hang out. I mean, it still explores, but it's obvious. And that was as controversial as that last podcast that you referenced was within the tarantula community, because there were I did get some nasty comments and some pushback from people that are their identity is attached to the fact that tarantulas are instinctual 100%. Have no capacity for thought or stress, or they can get stressed out, but they can't make a decision. They can't learn. They can't be.
That's wrong.
And it's like now we have evidence, like scientific research that's showing
the contrary.
So we gotta stop. We gotta stop acting like they don't, because now it's just ignorance and it's just laziness and being cheap. Like, you don't want to buy the nice enclosure, and you don't want to get enrichment, and you don't want to give them the lighting, and and it has nothing to do with the care of the animal. That just has to do with you not wanting to evolve and you not wanting to spend money. At least
recently we had on one of our local vets, one of our local exotic vets onto the pod, and he said that recently he had to go ahead and treat and see a tarantula. And I'm like, who would have thought taking your tarantula to the vet? That's crazy. What he said he had to do was that there was there was something wrong with the leg of the tarantula, and he saw that there was a fungus growing. So what he did is he took a sample of the fungus with a cotton swab, went ahead. Obviously, he can't anesthetize the spider, so he has to safely hold it and all that. But he went ahead and got the
cotton swab and sent the fungus off for testing to go ahead and identify the particular species. Any possible treatments could be tested for, that whole thing. And it's like, who in the tarantula hobby is taking their teas to the vet? Nobody. Almost nobody is doing that.
There are a lot of us that try. Like, I had a tarantula stuck in a mold once, and I called my vet, and he was like, "No, I don't deal with invertebrates. I'll see your snake maybe or your gecko, but I'm not looking at spiders." And there's also when it comes to like reptiles, you can notice behavioral differences, like maybe their eyes get glassy, or their breathing's weird, or they're being lethargic, or their head's moving strange. Tarantulas don't really have that. It's really difficult to look at a spider and be like, "Oh, there's something wrong. That thing's sick." Like,
it's so hard.
Usually by the time you can tell there's an issue, it's way too late. Like any chance to remedy that has been long gone, and it's they're in their final hours at that point. It's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking.
There's so many different environmental factors. It could be they got some poison on them, or some kind of chemical, or it could be a neurological issue, or
it could be DKS, internal parasites.
Yeah, I mean it's like
a whole thing.
DKS is like the umbrella term for I don't know what the fuck's wrong with my tarantula, but it's sick and gonna die. Like, so it has DKS. It's very frustrating because even then people are comparing, and we're trying to get anecdotal evidence and figure it out, and it's like the exact same symptoms are being described by someone who's like had a partner, somebody sprayed their tarantula with bug spray. It's acting the same way as somebody who ate some crickets that were infested with some kind of parasite, or somebody that it's very frustrating. And it's just one of those things, like, we need a lot more research.
Yeah, for sure.
We figure it out.
If you're listening to this, you're a reptile lover. All right. And what do we all need? We need supplies. So we got you covered. Head on over to imperialreptiles.com and use the code REPTILESWITH to get a specific discount special to us and our listeners for your reptile supplies today. One more time, that's imperialreptiles.com. Use the code REPTILESWITH. Alrighty, we are back. Tino, tell me your favorite parts of your talk with Richard.
Yeah. We're officially spiders now.
We are.
That's the thing. Yeah. You guys gotta...
Wait, which Peter are we? Can I be Garfield?
Oh, you want to be Garfield?
Yeah.
You can be Garfield. I'll let you do that.
This is the Spiders With podcast.
Yeah. So, we talked about our time at AnimalCon together. How I hijacked the panel. How much fun that was.
Yeah.
And we talked basically about the question that Diane had asked us on that panel about wild-caught tarantulas or inverts in general, our opinions on that. Basically, Richard and I have the same mindset. For the most part, wild-caught animals are not great pets. They are not really the best opportunities for a lot of people to learn the best parts of insect keeping or invertebrate keeping. We also talked about just collecting in general from the wild, how certain species they're recently discovered, or they pictures of it finally come out, and then all of a sudden, boom, like
people are trying to buy it, and
people are already trying to buy it. It's already on the next importers list.
I actually remember that specifically when the isopod trade like really started going off. I was working with somebody who was somebody that was at the front of that isopod stuff.
Yep.
And it was like that. It's like new things would come out, he had to get them. New things would have to come out, he had to get them.
If you're into isopods, you usually see a genus name, SP, and then a common name. Yeah. Cubaris species rubber ducky, for instance.
Yeah.
Cubaris is just an estimation. They don't actually know that it should be in Cubaris. I don't think it should be. I think it should be in Nestadillo, but that's just me. And then SP rubber ducky because they haven't been speciated. This is so new. This stuff is so new that people are just grab them into the hobby. They're taken care of the same way. Send them.
That's
sell
something
them.
You'll see in pretty much every aspect of the animal trade.
Every aspect.
You're never gonna run away from that.
It is really sad.
Which really sucks.
Is there anything that you guys spoke about that you were surprised that he said?
Not really, because for the most part, I think he speaks a lot about the things that people don't want to talk about.
Okay.
The back ends of certain deals, of certain aspects of invertebrate keeping, especially about care. Richard's channel, the Tarantula Collective, is not all about, but mostly about captive tarantula husbandry, and so he wants to go ahead and teach people that, hey, you know what? It's all about naturalistic enclosures. It's about providing them more enrichment, giving the tarantulas and spiders more options. A lot of people don't think that. They don't think that, like,
say is tarantula enrichment. Like, what would be an example of that?
An example. So we were talking about like a hierarchy of needs for tarantulas and animals in general. At the bottom, you have your basic needs, your food, water, all that stuff. At the top of the pyramid is choice. for inverts, a lot of people think, oh, they're purely instinctual, but no, they can actually make decisions. If you have separate parts of the enclosure with different light levels, they can make the choice to be in the dark or the light. Same thing with heat. If you put a heat pad, they can go warmer, they can go colder, or substrate level. You can go ahead and have deeper substrate in certain parts, and then that gives the tarantula more opportunities to dig, make certain specific types of burrows.
Interesting.
Also things to climb on, things to within the environment to go over, underneath, web up. That whole thing is... The tarantula knows what it needs more than we know what it needs. You know, he's like, oh, I want some more humidity right now. He can go to an area with more humidity. I want to go ahead and be darker. He can make that. He or she can make that decision. And a lot of people think that a jar of dirt is kind of just all it needs. And to an extent, a lot like turtles, invertebrates are survivors. They really will,
figure it out.
Try to make the best out of a bad situation. But we're... like Richard is talking about on his channel, more and more we're starting to be like, you know what, if we're going to keep these animals in captivity, why not give them the best that they can.
So it really is a diverse environment. That's really what it comes out to.
Yep.
Interesting.
If there's anything that if there's something specific that I've learned throughout everything that we've done throughout this podcast, people we've met, conversations we've had, is just that the common theme for all animals is how we're keeping them and how we can improve.
Yep.
Mind you, you guys know that I haven't been in this that long. I mean, it's coming on to 10 years, which, and it sounds like a long time, but I still feel new. And I don't know if they were having these conversations before, but I'm happy we're having these conversations today, where no matter what it is between a ball python, a blue tongue, tarantula, a turtle, that now we can see, okay, how can we offer the best, be real stewards to these animals? Obviously there's different realms of keepers. You have the breeders, you have the hobbyists, you have the pet tubers, you have the reptile shops, whatever. And each one of them is going to have to care for their animals a specific way that suits their own personal needs. But we should have a way that certain things should get done so we can offer the best for the animal while it's in our care. Maybe a reptile shop has an animal for a specific amount of time, so they might have to do things a little more simple to make sure that the animal is doing some of the behaviors, is eating, is pooping, is drinking water, etc. It's just to make sure that it thrives for its forever home. Maybe a breeder that is keeping an animal for the length of its life to reproduce. Maybe they need to have higher numbers. How can you do those higher numbers and also maintain a certain amount of care? And then with the pet tuber side, let's say, it's like, there are a lot of exposition, a lot of this is that is this. I'm just happy that we're getting to. I like that we're getting to a place where it's just like, okay, open conversation. It's not so much taboo. It's like, how can we better improve this and make sure that our individual needs are met? Because at the end of the day, the animals are offering us something, and we should be able to offer the best for them.
One of the things that makes it difficult is the stigma against invertebrates. It's hard to convince someone, hey, your tarantula, your centipede needs a lot more, when they can't really read that animal. And it's when you talk to dog and cat people, they're like, oh, I can tell it loves me. Yeah, it's obvious, And you also learn that animal. We've been learning these animals for eons, It's a lot easier to tell when that animal is happy than a snake, than a lizard.
Yeah, it's
really
hard to
difficult.
get people to understand that with reptiles. I could only imagine inverts.
It's so hard.
Terrible.
It's so hard. Almost impossible a lot of the times, especially since invertebrate health is also very difficult to determine until it's already too late. One thing that did surprise me with what Richard had said is that he's very on board kind of with the KFC mentality, but for invertebrates. He wants that... He described it as a canyon, if you obviously saw it, between the conservationists and scientists and the pet keepers on this side, and that divide is huge even in invertebrates. He's had several instances where he's like, I want to go ahead and be involved in programs to help tarantulas in the wild. I want to go ahead and donate to preserving land and all that stuff. One thing he wants is something specific for tarantulas. There's only so many tarantula specific organizations out there, when even the Indigo Society, the Orient Society has indigo specific centers for them. Tarantulas is going to be but think about how cool that is. People milk tarantulas, people keep tarantulas in enclosures in toxicology labs and then have to go through the process of milking them to produce antivenom for them. so I can only imagine, like, for a conservation standpoint, just the clinicalness, the biosecurity of all of it, the types of enclosures that people would have. It's crazy. So in terms of kind of trying to bridge the gap between the conservationists and the private keepers, he shares that sentiment.
Cool. So I guess we'll end right here. Again, if you guys like these hybrid episodes, let us know. We'll do more of them. If there's any way that we could better improve it, let us know. We take your feedback very serious. Also, some availability for us is starting to move around, and we're going to be doing some podcasts which involve us traveling. Maybe we could do a little more of that. If there's anybody in Florida that you want us to see, or if you're in Florida want to do the podcast, let's see how we can link up. Let's make this happen. This was the Reptiles with Podcast.